Picture this, after a long day, you finally come home to play your favorite game. Your computer connects to a server somewhere far away, and that goes for the other 99 people playing the game with you. That server could be just down the street, or even in a completely different country, and it needs a lot of power to handle so many players at the same time. But what if I told you that you could transform that exact server into your very own gaming PC? Well, that's exactly what I'm going to be doing in this video. So today, I'm not only going to show you how I turned an entire server into a gaming PC, but an absolute monster PC, and find out if it's actually worth buying a whole server just to play a video game. But to quickly answer that second question, it's definitely not worth buying an entire server, and I don't think that surprised you at all because game servers can cost between $500 and $300 a month. And in just a few months, it's already gonna cost me more than my own PC, so renting a whole ass server just isn't worth the price since I want one just to use it as a personal computer. However, I just need the server for this video, so I was willing to spend a couple $100s for a month. But this brings up a new problem, because even if I do rent out a server, the physical server is still in their data center and not in my house, so it would literally be impossible for me to connect it to my monitor to play games on it. So this left me with one of two options. I could buy a server or give up on the challenge. So I began my search and found a server on sale for 62% off. Fantastic. Oh my! This is the craziest ripoff I've ever seen. I know these are being sold specifically to billion-dollar companies, but 14 racks for a server with only 32 gigs of DDR4 RAM is outrageous. Even I have 32 gigs of DDR5 RAM in my PC, and it only cost me 90 bucks, so there's no way they couldn't have fit at least 128 gigs of RAM into this thing. You could build a server with better specs than this for way less money. So maybe buying a server straight from a massive company like Lenovo was probably not a good financial decision. I owe $8 trillion to who? And so I decided to go to Amazon, where they sell a lot of mini home servers, which is a bit more affordable for a teenager like me. I don't know about you, but I'm not trying to spend a whole year of university tuition for a single YouTube video. The only problem now is that each one of these servers is super small, or average size, depending on how you want to look at it. And a lot of these mini servers are just NASes, which are basically mini file servers, so I doubted that it was even possible to play a game on one of these. Anyways, after scrolling through a bunch of these servers, I noticed that the brand TerraMaster kept popping up, and that's a company that wanted me to do a full review on one of their mini servers. And back on October 25th, I told them I had absolutely no interest in doing a 10-minute ad, so I ghosted them. But now that I need a server to do this video, I decided I might as well ask them to send me one. I didn't tell them anything about what I was going to do with this thing, so I have all the freedom in the world to mess around and make this thing get as much FPS as possible. But what I didn't think was possible was gaming on a file server, because on their official website, it says that you cannot install Windows on it. But I was willing to bet that they're only just saying that to stop you from trying, so I told them to send their file server anyways. It is now November 10th. And I finally received a box at my front door. But before we move on, I want to be 100% transparent with you guys, as I literally make videos for you. This NAS was provided for review only and no additional compensation was received, meaning that I was not paid and all thoughts and words are mine. I know a lot of YouTubers lie about things like this, so you have the right to be skeptical, and I would be too, honestly. But with that out the way, let's take a look at what this thing can actually do. It has a 10 gigabit USB-C port, two 10 gigabit USB Type A ports, a 10 gigabit Ethernet port, and an HDMI port. But there's one crucial part that's missing because they didn't send me an SSD, so I can't even turn this thing on. Luckily, I have this external SSD enclosure with me, so I'm going to be installing my own 1TB SSD. I put on their really weird heatsink design with this sticky thing and a couple rubber bands, and installed it into my server. Not sure how long these rubber bands are actually going to last though, because I stretched one of them out too far and it's already tearing. Unfortunately, that's it for smooth sailing, because I don't even know how to use a NAS in the way it's supposed to be used, let alone know how to turn it into a gaming PC. So I thought that maybe if I learned how to use this file server the right way, maybe this could help me learn how to use it the wrong way. But using it the wrong way is one of the only things that TerraMaster urged me not to do, because it could void my warranty. But I do not care, because this is my server and I'm going to do whatever I want with this thing. To learn how to use this server, I watched some videos and read the manual, which are both things I probably should have done earlier, but I was busy doing absolutely nothing with my life, because who doesn't love procrastinating? Now, to turn this server into a gaming PC, I need to connect it to my monitor, which is something you normally don't do with a server. So we gotta enter the forbidden room of death to grab the final piece of the puzzle, an HDMI cable. I'm acting like this shit is a rare collectible or something, but it's literally like a common household item. So I turned it on and things were going well.
The hell was that noise?
Things are still going well, and what the heck is going on the screen? And it was at this point I realized that this was going to be a way harder challenge than I thought, because just like one of those big servers you connect to in a video game, this thing wasn't designed to display images on screen, but to connect to it through the internet. I spent the last hour installing a copy of Windows onto my external hard drive, but remember, this is a home server, so it wasn't going to be that easy, because I turned it back on and it wouldn't show my new Windows installation, and it's forcing me to go back to the screen again. And here was where I realized that this SSD was dead, because it's not showing up on the network. Now you're probably thinking that I'm going to instantly fix this problem by grabbing another SSD, because so far in this video, every time I'm missing some PC hardware, I just rip it out of my ass. But this time, I actually do not have a single SSD lying around. Looks like my bottomless basement actually does have a bottom. But hey, I'm not one to give up so easily, so after some thinking, I decided to do what anyone in my position would do. I ripped the SSD straight out of my laptop. Who needs a working laptop when you got a video to make? RIP laptop, your sacrifice will be remembered. The SSD ended up being a lot hotter than I expected, so maybe it was actually worth spending the time putting the heatsink on it. And I swear putting on these rubber bands is harder than it looks. Either way, I heard the 3 beeps and we're ready to go. It's letting me initialize the server now, so it looks like switching the SSD was the solution, and this Intel SSD is nothing but hot garbage. Literally. I first tried to log in like a normal user, and it asked me for a username and password. So obviously I tried my TerraMaster login, but it didn't work. I then tried every single combination that made sense to me, and still nothing was working. So I immediately tried to start booting into Windows, and now the issue here is that the NAS keeps trying to boot using RAID system, which basically bypasses everything and forces us back to this weird black screen with the white text we kept seeing earlier. So to get past this, my first idea was to just delete all these command lines, because it looks like that top half is just trying to boot into the RAID system. So the obvious decision was to just eliminate that from the equation and boot from the init system, which I honestly have no idea what it is, but it's going to be at least slightly more useful than the RAID system. And of course there was a syntax error, and I was not going to go through all of that again just to fix the code. So my next option was to try and boot into the BIOS to prioritize my external hard drive with the Windows installation on it to try and stop RAID. After several failed attempts at booting into the BIOS, I finally got in, and I kind of just stared at the screen as a sigh of relief, because I'm finally looking at a different screen after 15 minutes of hard work. But that wouldn't last for long. So the first thing I did was disable TOS boot first, and it still booted into TOS, yet again ignoring my hard drive. I then tried disabling every boot option except for my hard drive, but I was getting tired, so I accidentally disabled everything except for my completely empty SSD. And of course, if the drive you're trying to boot from is empty, the RAID system starts up again. And finally, after being stupid for almost an hour straight, I managed to get myself into Windows, and I was very happy. I actually did it. But there was still a long way to go. Even installing Windows on this thing was a challenge, because I had to keep my hard drive plugged in, leaving only one other USB port available. So I had to switch between plugging in my keyboard and mouse to be able to get through the installation process. But it's 1:43 AM now, and I'm getting very tired, so I'll see you guys in the morning. So I woke up this morning ready to get everything running, but the NAS just wouldn't connect to the network. Even with the Ethernet cable securely plugged in, it was like the cable wasn't even there at all. At first, I tried the usual, restarting the NAS, checking the cable connections, and even rebooting the router, but nothing seemed to work. Something was wrong with this Ethernet port, so I decided to try and grab an external network adapter to bypass it and see if that could finally get me connected. Hopefully I can get this Ethernet cable to work after this, because again, we don't have very many USB ports to work with. Now this caused an entire domino effect of problems, because to install the driver, I need my USB with the files plugged in, as well as the actual network adapter itself. And that makes it impossible to connect my keyboard or my mouse, and the only thing that can solve this is a USB dock. But unfortunately, I don't have a USB dock. However, a company gifted me one of these massive laptop coolers which comes with a USB dock, so it works I guess. But it's absolutely huge, and now the entire right side of my desk is completely unusable. And after a light 45 minutes of messing around, we finally managed to download the network driver onto the NAS, and all we have to do now is wait for this Windows update. This is easily the longest Windows installation I've ever done, but it makes sense because this is also the most outrageous challenge I've ever done. It is now 2:06 PM and we're finally here on Windows 11. And before we install any games or recording software, I'm actually most curious about the specs. We have an Intel N95 with integrated graphics, which is good for a file server, but for gaming, it's definitely gonna need a bit of work, because even though we have 8 gigs of super fast DDR5 RAM, we still need to put a GPU in the server to get competitive frame rates at 1080p. But I know what you're thinking, this server is smaller than a graphics card, so how would this even be possible? Well, I already prepared for this. From the start, I actually knew that the integrated graphics in this thing are not quite enough, so we're going to connect an external GPU to this thing. Now, 99% of people just connect their GPU directly to their motherboard, but to make this challenge possible, we need one of these eGPU setups, which are basically just mini-sized motherboards that can only fit a graphics card. But here's the catch, I'm not just using any GPU, I'm using an RTX 4000 ADA. This tiny server is about to run with a crazy workstation GPU that was never intended to be crammed into a setup like this. But here's the deal, I don't actually have one of these eGPU setups yet because I ordered it 2 days ago, and it's actually going to arrive later tonight. But I've been trying to get this server to work for the past 3 hours, so I'm going to leave it for tomorrow. But just before 8 PM, it hit me. An email from Amazon. Better yet, an order update from Amazon. And if you've ever bought anything online before, you know that an order update is the worst thing you could possibly get. Apart from a really bad sickness, which is what I have right now, but that's against the point. And my package is delayed until November 22nd. What kind of 2-day shipping is this, dog? It felt like all the odds were against me. But this afternoon I got a delivery update that was good. And then a few minutes later it got delayed again. But we finally have it, and I'm gonna be totally honest here, I did not expect this thing to be so small, but hopefully we can make it work. We got almost every piece of the puzzle, but there's one last thing we need to turn this server into a proper gaming PC, and that's a power supply, because this GPU is gonna need some power. Emphasis on some because we only need 70 watts. But the only power supply I have is this 750 watt power supply that straight up looks like an atomic bomb. But since this thing is so old, part of the power supply was also lost in time. It's missing the cable that's supposed to plug it into the wall, so I have to resort to stealing the one in my dad's PC, and I'm just hoping this power supply doesn't explode, because you're not supposed to mismatch any of the PSU cables, let alone the one that connects directly to the wall. After this hiccup, I was just about to plug in the 24-pin connector and found out that this is actually an 18-pin, which won't work unless your definition of working is spontaneously combusting. With everything failing on me, I was thinking about just giving up because it's really late, but I was not as tired as I was determined. So I kept coming up with ideas, and then it hit me. Why not just connect the server to my main PC? I got an 850 watt power supply in there, and it might be overkill, but it'll have to work. So I plugged in the 24-pin connector from my PSU to my GPU dock, and my GPU fans immediately started spinning, and that is a great sign. Even Task Manager recognized the RTX 4000, so I think we're just about to complete the challenge. So I booted up Fortnite and got over 144 FPS while looking into the sky. We could probably get it to 200 if I optimized it, but I'll worry about it another time. For now, my life is complete and I can finally rest. But if you want to see me overclock a $4,000 graphics card until I get 1200 FPS, watch this video next.